The context is I'm intrigued by hidden sound and ignored sounds, sounds you have to search for. Amongst other things, I also work on experimental music and all different things, but specifically regarding field recording and sound art, and field recording with capital F, because it is quite a big thing, I think. For me, it's about finding the source and hidden things within the ground, within the water, within rocks and the surroundings. And when I go into like large expanses of places, for instance like Dartmoor, or very empty spaces, empty of humanity, with only a few imprints of it, I kind of imagine it as kind of a soup bowl, almost like you're in this bowl of sound and sonics, because I firmly believe that sound is quite an ignored part of the senses to be discussed, and like that sound there. So that's the concept of it, as reaching out and finding hidden sounds where people don't go so much, especially in a wintry season, as I did with my fellow visual artist I went with, and just to extract it and bring it back and show people. That's the concept, I would say. The location was, I suppose, randomly chosen because via Geode Arts, through a partner, an artistic partner, we were able to get funding to go somewhere on an arts research trip, and we came up with a few ideas, and we both agreed that we wanted to go somewhere that was like I said, very empty and devoid of humanity, where I could find a purer sound without too much, impression from humanity, even though you can never get away with it with planes and automobiles and everything, and people working miles away where the sound just kind of comes along. And Dartmoor was always a place I wanted to search around and kind of find that. So that's the reason. It was just many different places, and that was kind of the favourite, I think. Yeah, the techniques. I work with tape a lot. I'm quite into analog sound. I suppose coming from and being brought up in the 70s and 80s, that was the tech and of my formative years. So I have a romantic vision of it from young youth, and I think since concentrating on sound, I've gone back to it a lot because it has a touchy-feely physical element to it. So I've done a few other things with lots of tape loops and lots of reel-to-reel machines. But for this, I just wanted to use the singular one, which I have behind me to my left, your right. So the technical aspect in this regard is having, there's 3 different sources involved. All the different field recordings I extracted, I kind of mixed, edited for a main piece that is put out on the main speakers here, and then I want to bring something physical. It's almost as if I'm bringing something back from the location. So I decided to tape on this one here, record onto it one of the recordings, and I chose mindfully one recording I made of contact mics that were placed onto the shaking barbed wire fence with different levels of wire and different kind of thicknesses. and that's recorded onto this tape loop here. And then as another physical element, it was quite a quick decision when I first came up with this, but I actually like the idea of having something almost man-made within the piece, almost in relation to the man-made things which I saw in the Dartmoor hills and valleys and quarries. And I brought this guitar, which this tape loop gently strums, and it's the kind of drone that's just beneath the piece, as is the tape loop, and then the delicacies and the textures of the main piece are more prevalent, and there's a balance between the three. The prints are quite an important aspect. I wouldn't call myself a photographer, but I take photos. So I have a very old, big manual camera that I do all the settings myself, and I'm able to get some good prints done from my network of friends. And when I was there, I was very struck with some of just the physicality of the rocks and the water and the quarries. And I didn't actually take that many photos. I took literally about 30 photos, but in the main, they all came out in a very imposing way, I felt. Especially the main piece, which is the large rock that's to my left here. It's a tor, so that's on right at the top of the hill, and there was almost a decision factor to go and walk to that point, because it was quite a far walk, and we couldn't work out the size of it just because there's no reference point to it, and it's a huge thing, like a big rock that's been left by the ice as it's retrieved millions of years ago. And the prints have such for me, an imposing element of the whole piece as a whole, because I think it stimulates the imagination. It gives you locational and psychogeographical elements to the sound and the piece as a whole. And I actually can't imagine sharing this piece without seeing some form of the visuals of it, because that's as part of the sonics, as part of the physical element, as I think, basically. I think very visually, and I think a lot of artists do, obviously. And even though someone asks me what I'm into, what I do, and what elements I like to do, I often say sound artist, or sound artist musician. But the physical and the visual is always part of it. I don't really have any restraints or parameters that stop me saying I can't do this because I should be just doing sound. For me, it's as much of the communication tool with it, even though I wouldn't say I'm a photographer or a visual artist. It just latches within a lot of the pieces I make, actually, for some reason. And I think it is just because I have a visual nature of putting things together. Even when I'm producing music, I'm quite a visual person, and I tend to work with graphic scores, whether it's before or after, to communicate with collaborators, for that reason as well. And in fact, the next project I'm looking at working on is like a graphic score that's come from a visit in Scotland along a shoreline of beautiful geology and rock formations, and that's the kind of beginning of a sound piece, but the sound is going to come at the actual end, where I'm doing prints of things and then making decisions on markings on these prints and putting parameters within it that then will launch sound at the very end of the process. And these were taken in Cove Park in a recent residency on the shoreline of Long Loch in Helensburgh, which is a beautiful place. So for me, there's always a visual aspect at some point of a process. So yeah, it's a very important part of it.